Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm taking a look at the TransTec Frog plug and fly 5-inch racer. Now I don't know what it is about these companies naming models after reptiles. I'm seeing a lot of frogs, turtles, toads, lizards. Are all those reptiles? I don't know. I guess they must translate into something that sounds cooler in another language. But anyways, this seems like a solid model. I like the frame and all of the electronics are really neat and tidy. It's a TrueX and we have some arm protectors here and I think the arms are 4mm carbon. Something that's quite deceiving though is the weight. Now I thought this was going to be an ultralight, but all of this down the side here is aluminium or aluminum, whatever your persuasion is, and the all-up weight is 314 grams, which isn't too bad. But if we take a look at the motors, these are either a copy of or an OEM of the Brother Hobby Tornado 2205 2600 kV. Which is a beautiful looking motor, and you guys know I'm a big fan of Brother Hobby's stuff, but compared to today's more modern motors, they are a little outdated. So we have a full base rather than today's naked bottoms, and this fan design up the top, it looks great, but there's actually a lot of extra material here that is adding weight to the motor. You see, the height of the stator is only 5mm, and the bow is lifting up another good 6mm above that, so it looks appealing and it looks like it's doing a good job cooling down the motor. But these days some of the 2-3 stator size motors are probably about the same weight as this. And why is that important? Well, the advantage of putting a smaller stator motor on a model these days is that you can greatly reduce the weight, say for example on a ultralight build. Some of the 2204 motors, they go down to 20 grams or so, and the 23 stator size motors are around 30 grams to 34 grams. But the narrower stator means that the motor has less torque. And then couple that up with the shorter height of 5mm, it means that a heavier copter will start to bottom out at the top of the throttle. So even though these are a 2600 kV motor, the fact that this copter isn't an ultralight might put it at a disadvantage when it comes to this motor choice. So the props they have provided, and you only get one set of these by the way, they are the Gemfan 5042, which is a fairly light and low pitched prop, and I actually think that might help it. The lower torque of this motor will mean that if you put a heavy pitch prop on it, then you'll actually probably get less thrust because the motor will struggle to turn it. And I actually think a lighter freestyle prop such as the GEPRC 5040s may even give it more thrust than these. But of course then you have to worry about the durability of the prop and it breaking, etc. So yeah, that is a choice you have to make. Now you have to remember that kV is measured without prop load, so if you put a heavy prop on a low torque motor like this, it won't meet those high RPMs when there is a load on there. But I'll fly it on these anyways and we shall see what it is like. So these ESCs are a 4-in-1 30 amp BL Heli S and are D-Shot 600 capable. The flight controller is a Omnibus F3, so not an F4, but I'm always a little bit relieved when they're an F3 because if you want to do a bit of tinkering around, you don't have to worry about inversion and stuff like that, and it's also a really stable platform, but of course you can't do 32 kilohertz on it, so that is a downside if you are into that. It has got a micro SD card slot for black box and it has Betaflight on-screen display, but it did need a full setup on it and it doesn't have a current meter either. It does have a beeper, but it's soldered direct to the board, so be careful with that because if it gets knocked then it can lift the pads off the board. Then at the back we have a LED board which is connected to the DIN so you can program it. And we have a good quality XT60 connector. One criticism that I have of this being a plug and fly is that they have given you the correct 4-pin JST connector for your receiver, and I've added an XM Plus here, but the connector is right up the front of the flight controller, so you basically have to take the whole thing apart to plug your receiver in, and there's not much space for it up the top either. Now, the VTX has been cable tied to this blank board, which is part of the stack, but only the front two screws have been added. I think that's because the back ones wouldn't fit with the frame swooping down like it does. The VTX is a switcher from 25 milliwatt to 500 milliwatt, and it's a 48 channel. It's got a single button on it to change the settings and a very handy LED board to tell you the channel, the band and the power level, and you can just about see that through the top of the frame. But it's also got smart audio connected, and it's TBS smart audio as well, so there's no issues with it not working with certain versions of Betaflight, etc. Now, it does have a sleeve dipole antenna coming out of the back, and it's soldered direct to the board, and that is different to how the pictures are on the original. I think it has a SMA connector, so you got to bear that in mind. But with the Menace antennas and diversity that we have these days, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, but we'll take a look at that later in the FPV feed. The cam up front is a Runcam Mini, and I really like this camera. I think it's a good choice. It's got a 2.3mm lens on it, but it's not really protected by the frame for the triggered squad out there. Now, I've added a silicon battery mat here, so you are not given that in the package, but you are given two of these grippy battery straps, so you could argue that it's not needed. They also give you a battery plate, which I don't like to use because it just adds more weight. And we've got a couple of cable ties and some heat shrink, as well as a carbon fiber wrench for your prop nuts. So yeah, you have to put the props on, and it doesn't fit in the box with the props on. So there aren't really any instructions, unfortunately. You are just given a single sheet of paper with the copter's specs on it and a schematic of the flight controller, but no Betaflight setup, so you'll have to do a full setup yourself. Okay, let's line of sight this guy while the sun is out. Quite a rare thing around here. Let's have a see what the punch is like. Yeah, punch is nice with those high kV motors. And even though it's just a 2.2 stator size, without running a GoPro, it's got plenty of torque to deal with it. It's not bottoming out or taking time for the props to spool up. Let's try a bit of acro. You know, despite it being a high kV motor, it's actually not running too loud. I imagine a lot of full throttle runs and it would be a bit louder, but I always like that. Yeah, I do like these props. Oh, it's nice and floaty. Yeah, fairly lightweight model, which I'm always a fan of. I feel like they're defying gravity when they dance through the air like this. Yeah, very nice on the power loop. It's not wanting to drop out at the top, but that is something that the bottom mounted batteries do, and it's a characteristic I actually quite like. Yeah, does loops quite nicely. So I have reduced the PIDs a little bit because stock Betaflight PIDs, they are designed for a GoPro, and you tend to find you get a little bit of oscillation if you run those high PIDs without a GoPro. Oh yeah, it feels fast. Yeah, I like that. yeah. It's flying really nice line of sight. It's got bags of punch. And not too antisocial. It could even have a lighter prop, I think. Like a 5040. I like those GPRC props. And it'd probably be a bit noisier on those and a bit more thrust. But yeah, I think it's got ample. Well, there's no drift in angle mode, so let's bring it in. So when I went to do FPV, the lack of torque from the motors was much more apparent, and it sounded fast, but when I did some speed runs, it only clocked 80 miles per hour, and the speed just decreased from there as the battery got lower. So to compare that to my Floss, which runs a 5040 lower pitch prop on a more torquey and lighter 2206 2700 kV motor, I could get over 100 miles per hour. And if you look at the thrust stats for the Tornado motor, something like a 5045 Cyclone actually gives less thrust. So I think my conclusion of this is it's a nice intermediate 5-inch model, and I don't think you're going to get much more speed out of it than that. Now, there was a slight bit of noise on the image, but it wasn't that noticeable once I was flying, but you guys know that video noise bothers me. And I was only running at 25 milliwatt here, and I was getting a fair amount of breakup as well, but that could have been my antenna placement in all fairness, but I thought was important to note. But it did fly really nice, so I'll give you my PIDs, and I would imagine the stock PIDs would be fine for running it with a GoPro. The flight time was pretty nice, I think over 4 minutes, and that's given it some depth, so I guess the amp draw isn't too bad with the lower torque and the lower pitched prop, so I think it'd make a fairly nice first Acro 5-inch model. I'd compare it to the Halifar Futon 2 in terms of features, speed and price, so if you only like buying from Banggood, then it's a good option for that. But once again, if you can spend a little more money, I'd still go for the Hawk 5 from Emax. It's faster and it's better set up out of the box, and the only thing that it doesn't have is the smart audio. So I'll leave you with some flying, and I'll link the model in the below, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.